The morning sun broke through the blinds in Officer James Mercer's cramped apartment as he gulped down his third cup of coffee. His phone buzzed with a text from his partner, Detective Paul Wilson. "Got a situation. Meet me at the corner of 5th and Main in 20. James sighed, threw on his uniform, and headed out. The late September air felt crisp as he pulled up to the meeting spot. Paul was already there, leaning against his unmarked car. "What's so urgent?" James asked, stifling a yawn. Paul's eyes darted around before he spoke. "Remember that evidence that went missing from the Rodriguez case?" James tensed. "Yeah, what about it?" "Internal Affairs is sniffing around. They're asking questions." Both men fell silent. They'd been partners for 8 years at the West Side precinct. What had started as cutting small corners to close cases had grown into something darker over time. Missing evidence, planted drugs, falsified reports. Their list of sins had grown long. "So what's the plan?" James finally asked. Paul handed him a file. "I think I found our perfect fall person." Inside was a photo of Danielle Washington, a 35-year-old attorney who had been making waves in the community with her civil rights cases. "She's been a thorn in the department's side for years," Paul explained. "Always filing complaints about excessive force, racial profiling. If we can pin the missing evidence on her, no one would question it. She had access to the evidence room last month while working on the Taylor defense." James flipped through the file. "This is risky. She's got connections." "That's why it's perfect," Paul insisted. "No one will believe we'd be dumb enough to go after someone like her." Later that afternoon, they put their plan in motion. They planted a small amount of the missing evidence in Danielle's car while she was in court. Then they called in an anonymous tip about suspicious activity. Officer Chen, a rookie who didn't know any better, pulled Danielle over as she left the courthouse. "License and registration." "Please," Chen said, following protocol. Danielle complied without issue. "Is there a problem, officer?" "We received a report about your vehicle." "Do you mind if I take a look inside?" "Actually, I do mind. Do you have probable cause or a warrant?" Danielle asked calmly. James and Paul watched from their patrol car down the street. This was the tricky part. Chen radioed them. "She's refusing the search." Paul grabbed the radio. "Tell her we have reasonable suspicion based on an anonymous tip about drug activity involving her vehicle." They watched as Chen relayed the information. Danielle seemed to be weighing her options. As a lawyer, she knew her rights, but she also knew how these situations could escalate. "Fine," she finally said, "but I want this noted that I'm only consenting under protest." Chen began the search while Danielle stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed. When he reached under the passenger seat, he found exactly what James and Paul had planted there: a small evidence bag containing cocaine that had gone missing from the Rodriguez case, along with a document from the precinct with markings that tied it to the evidence room. "Ma'am, could you explain this?" Chen asked, holding up the bag with a confused expression. Danielle's face fell. "That is not mine. I have never seen that before in my life." But the trap was set. Chen called it in, and within minutes, James and Paul arrived as backup. They made a show of looking surprised. "Danielle Washington?" Paul said, pretending they weren't familiar with her. "You're under arrest for possession of narcotics and theft of evidence." "This is ridiculous." Danielle protested as Chen reluctantly handcuffed her. "Someone planted that. I'm being framed." James leaned in as he helped her into the patrol car. "Everyone says that. Save it for the judge." At the precinct, they booked her and placed her in a holding cell. Captain Rivera, who had worked with Danielle on community outreach programs, stopped by James's desk. "What's this I hear about arresting Danielle Washington?" the captain asked, concern evident in his voice. "Found evidence from the Rodriguez case in her car," James explained smoothly. "She had access to the evidence room last month." The captain frowned. "This doesn't sound right. Danielle is highly respected in this community." "Evidence doesn't lie, Captain," Paul chimed in. "We were surprised too." What none of them knew was that 3 days earlier, after a nationwide search, Danielle had been selected as the new police chief for their precinct. The current chief was retiring, and the mayor had been impressed with Danielle's background in law, her community work, and her ideas for police reform. The paperwork was still being processed, with a public announcement planned for next week. Meanwhile, Danielle sat in her cell, trying to make sense of what had happened. She knew she was being framed, but by whom and why? She had made enemies, certainly, but this seemed extreme. The next morning, Judge Raymond Harris was preparing for court when he received a visit from Detective Paul Wilson. "What brings you here, Detective?" the judge asked, shuffling papers on his desk. "I need a favor, Your Honor," Paul said quietly, closing the door behind him. The judge stiffened. "I don't do favors for police officers." "Let me rephrase," Paul said, pulling out his phone. "I have some interesting photos from that party at Councilman Peterson's lake house last summer, the one where you were in attendance." The color drained from Judge Harris's face. "What do you want?" "We're bringing in Danielle Washington today. Caught her with stolen evidence and drugs. We need this to stick fast and clean." Judge Harris removed his glasses. "Danielle Washington? Are you insane? She's one of the most respected attorneys in this city. Which is exactly why we need your help. No one else will touch this with a 10-foot pole. And if I refuse?" Paul slid his phone across the desk, showing a particularly damning photo of the judge in a compromising position. "These go to your wife and the Judicial Review Board." The judge stared at the photo, then at Paul. "I've known Danielle for years. She's not dirty." "Everyone has secrets," Paul replied. "Just make sure she gets remanded, no bail. We need time to build our case." After Paul left, Judge Harris sat at his desk, his hands shaking. He had a choice to make, and neither option was good. At the precinct, Officer Lisa Patel was processing paperwork when a large envelope arrived from the mayor's office. Inside was the official appointment of Danielle Washington as the new police chief, effective next Monday. Lisa was about to deliver it to Captain Rivera when an emergency call came in, and in the chaos that followed, the envelope was buried under a stack of reports on her desk. That afternoon, Danielle appeared before Judge Harris for her arraignment. She had chosen to represent herself rather than call any of her lawyer friends. She wanted to understand what was happening before bringing others into it. "Danielle Washington," Judge Harris said, unable to meet her eyes. "You are charged with possession of controlled substances and theft of police evidence." "How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Danielle said firmly, "and I request immediate release on my own recognizance. I have deep ties to this community and am not a flight risk." From the back of the courtroom, James and Paul watched nervously. They needed her locked up to complete their plan. The prosecutor, a young woman named Kelly Barnes, who had never faced Danielle in court before, stood. "Your Honor, the defendant had access to sensitive evidence through her work as a defense attorney and abused that position of trust. We request she be held without bail." Judge Harris felt sick. He knew this was wrong. He knew Danielle. But the evidence seemed solid, and the photos in Paul's possession could destroy his career and marriage. Given the serious nature of these charges and the potential for tampering with witnesses or evidence, bail is denied. "The defendant will remain in custody until trial," he said, avoiding Danielle's shocked expression. As Danielle was led away, James and Paul exchanged satisfied glances. Phase 1 of their plan was complete. What they didn't realize was that their scheme was about to unravel in ways they couldn't imagine. And the woman they'd just framed would soon hold their careers and freedom in her hands. Danielle sat on the hard bench in her cell, still trying to process what had happened. The county jail smelled of bleach and despair. Around her, other women waited for their turn at justice, or whatever passed for it in a system that seemed stacked against them. "First time?" asked an older woman with tired eyes sitting across from her. Danielle nodded. "I'm being framed." The woman gave a dry laugh. "Honey, everyone in here says that." "In my case, it's true," Danielle said quietly. "I'm an attorney. I know exactly what they're doing." The woman studied her. "You got someone on the outside who can help?" Danielle thought about calling her colleagues, her friends at the ACLU, even the mayor who had just offered her the chief position. But something told her to wait. If someone had gone to these lengths to set her up, she needed to understand why before she brought others into it. "I'm going to help myself," Danielle replied. Meanwhile, at the West Side precinct, James and Paul were celebrating their small victory. "Did you see her face when the judge denied bail?" Paul chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Priceless." James didn't share his partner's joy. "This still feels risky. Washington isn't some street dealer. She's got connections. That's why we needed to move fast," Paul explained. "By the time her friends in high places start asking questions, we'll have built such a solid case that no one will doubt she's guilty." Officer Chen approached their desks looking uncomfortable. "Can I talk to you guys about the Washington arrest?" Paul's smile vanished. What about it? Some things don't add up, Chen said. The anonymous tip came from a burner phone that was activated 10 minutes before the call. And the evidence bag we found had no fingerprints on it, not even mine from when I handled it. James shot Paul a warning look. They'd been sloppy. What are you suggesting? Paul asked coldly. Chen shifted his weight. Nothing. It's just, she's well respected in the community. It seems odd. You're new here, Paul said, standing to tower over the younger officer. Sometimes the most respected people have the darkest secrets. Stay in your lane. Chen walked away, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and he wasn't the only one with questions. Captain Rivera was in his office reviewing the case file. Something felt off. He'd known Danielle for years through her work with the Community Oversight Committee. The idea that she would steal evidence and possess drugs didn't align with the woman he knew. He picked up his phone and called Judge Harris. Raymond, it's Michael Rivera. Got a minute to talk about the Washington case? There was a pause on the other end. Not really. The case is proceeding according to protocol. Come on, Ray, we've known each other 20 years. This doesn't feel right. Another pause. Sometimes things aren't what they feel like, Michael. The evidence is compelling. Evidence can be manipulated, Rivera pressed. Be careful what you're implying, Harris said, his voice suddenly cold. The court has made its decision. After hanging up, Rivera sat back, troubled by his friend's unusual response. Judge Harris had always been willing to discuss cases informally before. Something was definitely wrong. Back in her cell, Danielle had requested access to the law library and copies of the police report and evidence list. As an attorney representing herself, she had rights that other inmates didn't. She pored over the documents, making notes. The evidence bag found in her car contained 28 grams of cocaine that had gone missing from a case she had no connection to. The chain of custody form had her forged signature from when she had supposedly checked it out 3 weeks ago. This is sloppy work, she muttered to herself. Whoever had framed her hadn't expected her to fight back with legal expertise. She noticed something else. Officer James Mercer and Detective Paul Wilson were the arresting officers. But according to the report, they weren't the ones who had received the anonymous tip or conducted the initial search. They had coincidentally arrived as backup. Danielle wrote their names down. She had crossed paths with Wilson before on a case where she'd accused the Department of Evidence tampering. He'd been cleared in the internal investigation, but she remembered his cold stare during the hearings. At the courthouse, Judge Harris sat in his chambers, a glass of bourbon in his hand. It was only 2 p.m., but he needed something to steady his nerves. He had sentenced hundreds of people over his career, some guilty, some probably innocent. But he'd never knowingly participated in framing someone before. His phone buzzed. Another text from Paul Wilson. Need trial date ASAP, make it happen. Harris downed his bourbon and buzzed his clerk. Schedule Washington for trial next week. Clear my calendar if necessary. When his clerk expressed surprise at the rushed timeline, Harris snapped, Just do it. After she left, he opened his desk drawer and looked at a photo of his family. What would they think if they knew what he was doing? At the precinct, Lisa Patel finally discovered the envelope from the mayor's office that had been buried on her desk. She opened it and gasped. Oh my God, she whispered. Reading the official appointment of Danielle Washington as the new police chief, she immediately took it to Captain Rivera's office. Sir, we have a situation. Rivera read the document, his face darkening. When did this arrive? Yesterday, but with the emergency downtown, it got buried on my desk. I'm so sorry. Rivera stood up. This changes everything. Call the mayor's office right now. Find out if they know she's been arrested. Lisa hesitated. Should we tell Mercer and Wilson? Rivera considered this. No, not yet. I want to understand what's happening first. In the jail's visitation room, Paul Wilson sat across from Danielle, a fake expression of concern on his face. Ms. Washington, I wanted to check on you. This whole situation is unfortunate. Danielle studied him. Is it? Seems pretty fortunate for someone who wanted me out of the way. I'm not sure what you're implying, Paul said, his friendly facade slipping slightly. Let me be clear, Detective Wilson. I know I'm being framed. What I don't know is why. Yet, Paul leaned forward. Listen, sometimes it's better to take a deal. The DA might be willing to offer probation if you plead guilty. No jail time. So I can admit to crimes I didn't commit and ruin my career. No thanks. Your career might already be over, Paul said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Who's going to trust an attorney who steals evidence and does cocaine? Danielle remained calm. Innocent until proven guilty, detective. Something you seem to have forgotten. After Paul left, Danielle reflected on their conversation. His visit confirmed her suspicions that he was personally involved in framing her. But why the rush to get her to plead guilty? What was he afraid of? At the mayor's office, Captain Rivera sat across from Mayor Thompson, who was visibly distressed. "You arrested my new police chief?" the mayor asked incredulously. "Do you have any idea how this looks?" "I didn't know about the appointment," Rivera explained. "And I have concerns about the arrest itself. The evidence feels too convenient." The mayor pinched the bridge of his nose. "The announcement was supposed to be next week. We were going to surprise the department." "Well, now we have a bigger problem," Rivera said. "I think 2 of my officers might have framed the woman you just appointed to be their boss." "Jesus," the mayor muttered. "This could explode in all our faces." "I need time to investigate," Rivera said. "But we can't let Washington sit in jail if she's innocent." The mayor nodded. "Look into it quietly. If what you're suggesting is true, I want those officers gone. But if Washington is actually guilty, I need to know that too." Back at the precinct, James was growing increasingly nervous. He cornered Paul in the break room. "Chen is asking questions. Rivera's been locked in his office making calls all afternoon. I think we should back off." Paul shook his head. "Too late for that. We're committed now. What if we go to Washington, tell her it was a mistake? The evidence got mixed up. And admit to tampering and planting evidence? Are you insane?" Paul hissed. "We'd go to prison." "We might be headed there anyway," James muttered. While they argued, Officer Chen was at his desk, digging deeper into the case. He pulled up the security footage from the courthouse parking lot where Danielle's car had been when they claimed to have received the anonymous tip. He watched carefully and saw something disturbing. 20 minutes before the call came in, a figure that looked remarkably like Detective Wilson approached Danielle's car, bent down near the passenger side, and then walked away. Chen downloaded the footage to a secure drive. He wasn't sure what to do with it yet, but he knew it was important. In her cell, Danielle was piecing together her defense strategy. She had requested the body camera footage from Officer Chen and the dash cam from the patrol car. She had also written a motion to suppress the evidence based on an illegal search and seizure. But more importantly, she was trying to understand the bigger picture. 2 police officers had gone to extreme lengths to frame her. Judge Harris had rushed her case and denied bail for charges that typically wouldn't warrant it. Something bigger was at play. Then she remembered a case from 3 months ago. A young black man named Tyler Jones who had been arrested by Wilson and Mercer for drug possession. Tyler had insisted the drugs were planted, but no one believed him. Danielle had been preparing to take his case when suddenly all charges were dropped with no explanation. "What if Tyler was telling the truth?" she murmured. "What if this is a pattern?" As night fell over the city, the key players in this unfolding drama were all making decisions that would collide in the courtroom. Danielle was building her defense, determined to expose the truth. Captain Rivera was quietly investigating his own officers. Judge Harris was drowning in guilt and fear. And officers Wilson and Mercer were desperately trying to shore up their crumbling scheme. None of them realized just how dramatically everything would change when Danielle Washington stepped into court for her trial. The woman they thought they had successfully silenced was about to find her voice, and with it, the power to bring their whole corrupt system crashing down around them. Morning light filtered through the small window of Danielle's cell as she organized her notes. 3 days had passed since her arrest, and her trial was set for Monday, an unusually quick timeline that only reinforced her suspicion that someone wanted this case rushed through the system. A guard approached her cell. "Washington, you've got library time and access to the case files you requested." Danielle gathered her materials. The law library at the county jail was hardly impressive. Just a small room with outdated legal texts and 2 ancient computers with limited access to legal database. But it was enough for what she needed. She logged into the public record system using her attorney credentials, which thankfully hadn't been suspended yet. First, she pulled up every case Officer Mercer and Detective Wilson had been involved with over the past 5 years. "Let's see if there's a pattern here," she muttered, scanning the results. Hours passed as Danielle dove deeper into their case history. A troubling picture began to emerge. In the last 3 years, Mercer and Wilson had arrested an unusually high number of Black and Hispanic defendants on drug charges. Many of these cases were built on anonymous tips and convenient discoveries of evidence. Most defendants took plea deals, likely pressured by public defenders with overwhelming caseloads. But it was the handful of cases that had been mysteriously dropped that caught Danielle's attention. In each instance, the defendant had maintained their innocence and had either secured private counsel or, in 3 cases, Danielle herself had agreed to represent them pro bono. They back off when they think someone might actually investigate, she realized. She wrote down the names of every defendant in these dropped cases, planning to contact them once she got out, if she got out. Meanwhile, at the West Side Precinct, Captain Rivera sat in his office with Officer Chen, who had finally worked up the courage to share what he had found. "Show me the footage again," Rivera said, leaning forward. Chen played the security video from the courthouse parking lot, zooming in on the figure approaching Danielle's car. "I can't be 100% sure it's Detective Wilson," Chen admitted, "but the height, build, and walk are the same, and the timing lines up perfectly with the anonymous tip we received." Rivera rubbed his temples. "This isn't enough to prove anything, but it's definitely concerning." "There's more," Chen said hesitantly. "I pulled their arrest records for the past few years. They have an unusually high success rate with drug busts based on anonymous tips, and most of their arrests are people of color?" Rivera finished, his expression grim. Chen nodded. "Keep this to yourself for now," Rivera instructed, "but I want you to compile everything you can find. And Chen, be careful. If they're dirty, they won't appreciate you snooping around." Across town, Judge Harris sat in his favorite diner, a cup of coffee growing cold before him. He jumped when someone slid into the booth across from him. "You look terrible." "Ray," said Olivia Thomas, a retired judge and his former mentor. "Long week," he replied, avoiding her eyes. "I heard about the Washington case. Rushing to trial in a week? That's not like you." Judge Harris stared out the window. "Sometimes cases are straightforward." "Bullshit," Olivia said bluntly. "I've known Danielle Washington for 15 years. That woman doesn't have a corrupt bone in her body. And I've known you even longer, which is why I can tell something's very wrong here." His hands trembled slightly. "I can't discuss an ongoing case." Olivia leaned forward. "Ray, whatever mess you're in, it's not too late to fix it. Our job is to uphold justice, not undermine it." After she left, Judge Harris sat for a long time wrestling with his conscience. Finally, he pulled out his phone and made a call to an old friend at the FBI. Back at the jail, Danielle had shifted her focus to the evidence itself. The cocaine found in her car had come from the Rodriguez case, a major drug bust from 6 months ago. She requested all the documentation related to the evidence handling in that case. What she found was illuminating. According to the logs, 200 grams of cocaine had been seized in the original bust. When it was logged into evidence, the weight was recorded as 172 grams, and when samples were sent to the lab for testing 3 weeks later, only 150 grams remained. "They've been skimming drugs from evidence," she whispered, "then using some of what they stole to plant on people like me." This wasn't just about framing her. It was about covering up a long-running criminal operation within the police department. At his apartment, Detective Wilson paced nervously while talking on the phone. "We need to make sure all our bases are covered," he told James. "Chen's been asking questions, and I don't like the way Rivera's been looking at us. Maybe we should just come clean," James suggested. "Take a deal before this gets worse." "Are you crazy? We're talking about years of cases. If this unravels, we're not just losing our jobs, we're going to prison for decades." After hanging up, Paul opened his laptop and began deleting files and emails that could connect him to their scheme. But he didn't know about the secure server backups the department had implemented last year, where everything was being preserved. Meanwhile, Lisa Patel at the precinct was in a state of panic. She had been trying to reach the mayor about Danielle's appointment paperwork, but he wasn't returning her calls. The rumor mill was starting to churn with whispers about why Danielle Washington, a well-known attorney, was suddenly in jail on flimsy charges. When her phone finally rang, it was Captain Rivera. "Lisa, I need you to do something discreetly," he said. "Pull the evidence inventory reports for the Rodriguez case from 6 months ago. All versions, including the original intake forms. May I ask why, sir? Better you don't know yet. Just get them to me as quickly and quietly as possible." The wheels of justice and injustice were turning quickly now. The next morning, Danielle received an unexpected visitor. Anthony Torres, a former client she had helped clear of wrongful assault charges 2 years ago, had heard about her arrest and come to offer support. He now worked as a private investigator. "This is crazy, Danielle," he said across the visitation table. "Everyone knows you're being set up." "I need your help," she said, sliding a piece of paper across to him. "These are people who were arrested by the same officers under similar circumstances, but their cases were dropped." "Find them. See if they'll talk about what happened." Anthony nodded. "Consider it done." "What else?" "There's security footage from the courthouse parking lot on the day of my arrest. Get a copy if you can. You think they planted the evidence? I know they did. I just need to prove it." After Anthony left, Danielle returned to her cell and found a note slipped under her pillow. "Not everyone in the department is corrupt. Help is coming. Stay strong." She quickly destroyed the note, but the message gave her hope. Someone inside was on her side. At the courthouse, Judge Harris was reviewing Danielle's motion to suppress evidence when his clerk entered with news. "Sir," the FBI just called. "They're sending agents to review evidence in the Washington case." Harris tried to hide his relief. He had made the right call after all. "When will they arrive?" "Tomorrow morning. They're also requesting all records related to Detective Wilson and Officer Mercer's previous cases." This was it, the beginning of the end for the corrupt scheme. But Harris knew he still had to face the consequences of his own actions. At the precinct, the tension was palpable. Captain Rivera had called an unusual Saturday meeting with his senior staff, conspicuously excluding Wilson and Mercer. "I have reason to believe we have a serious problem in our department," he announced. "Evidence tampering, potentially planted drugs, and possibly a pattern of targeting specific communities." The room fell silent. "As of now, this is an internal investigation. No one speaks to Wilson or Mercer about this, but I want every case they've touched in the last 3 years reviewed." After the others filed out, Rivera asked Officer Chen to stay behind. "I've been approached by the FBI," Rivera confided. "They're opening an investigation based on evidence related to the Washington case." Chen looked worried. "Will they want to talk to me about what I found?" "Probably. But you did the right thing, Chen. Remember that." Outside the precinct, Paul Wilson watched Captain Rivera's office through binoculars from his car. He had noticed the unusual Saturday meeting and seen who was invited and who wasn't. "They're on to us," he muttered, reaching for his phone to call James. But before he could dial, he spotted something that made his blood run cold. 2 men in suits were entering the precinct, carrying briefcases with the unmistakable bulge of service weapons underneath their jackets. "Feds," he whispered. He started his car and sped away, calling James as he drove. "Pack a bag. We need to disappear for a while." "What? I can't just leave." "My family, listen to me," Paul interrupted. "The FBI is at the precinct right now. This isn't about losing our jobs anymore. This is about spending the rest of our lives in prison." Back at the jail, Danielle was preparing for her Monday trial when a guard informed her that she had another visitor. To her surprise, it was Mayor Thompson. "Ms. Washington," he said, looking uncomfortable. "This is an unfortunate situation." Danielle studied him carefully. "Yes, being framed usually is. I want you to know that certain information has come to light that may affect your case. I've spoken with the district attorney and there's a possibility the charges will be dropped." "I don't want them dropped," Danielle said firmly. "I want a trial. I want the truth to come out in open court about what these officers have been doing." The mayor looked surprised. "That would be quite public. There might be a better way to handle this." "A more convenient way, you mean? One that doesn't expose the corruption in the police department you oversee?" Mayor Thompson cleared his throat. "Your appointment as police chief is still on the table. Once this misunderstanding is cleared up—" "It's not a misunderstanding," Danielle interrupted. "It's criminal behavior by police officers. And if I do become chief, my first action will be to clean house, no matter who gets uncomfortable." The mayor left looking shaken. Danielle knew she had just made her intentions clear. She wasn't going to participate in a cover-up. Sunday afternoon brought another unexpected development. Anthony Torres returned with information from his investigation. "I found 3 of the people on your list," he reported. All had the same story: drugs planted by Mercer and Wilson after routine stops. Each was pressured to take a plea deal. When they refused and got decent legal representation, the charges mysteriously disappeared. Any luck with the security footage? Anthony grinned. Better than that. A friend at the courthouse pulled the footage, and guess what? Their system automatically backs up to cloud storage. Even if the original gets accidentally erased, there's a copy the police can't touch. For the first time since her arrest, Danielle felt truly optimistic. The pieces were falling into place. Sunday night, as Danielle made final preparations for her trial, the jail administrator appeared at her cell. "Washington, pack your things." She looked up, confused. "My trial's tomorrow. Not anymore. Charges have been dropped. You're being released." Danielle stood frozen. "No, I don't want the charges dropped. I want my day in court," the administrator shrugged. "Take it up with the DA. All I know is you're free to go." As she gathered her few belongings, Danielle felt a mix of relief and frustration. Being free was good, but a dismissed case wouldn't expose the corruption the way a trial would. Someone was still trying to sweep things under the rug. Outside the jail, Captain Rivera was waiting for her. "Ms. Washington," he said, extending his hand, "I owe you an apology on behalf of the department." "Where are Wilson and Mercer?" she asked. Rivera's expression darkened. "Gone. They didn't show up for their shift today. We have reason to believe they've fled." "And the evidence against them?" "Mounting by the hour. The FBI has taken over the investigation. They're looking at every case those two touched over the last 5 years. Danielle nodded, taking this in. "And Judge Harris?" "He's cooperating fully. Turned himself in this morning and admitted to being blackmailed." As they talked, Danielle noticed something in Rivera's hand. A manila envelope. "What's that?" she asked. Rivera handed it to her. "Your official appointment as our new police chief. The mayor asked me to deliver it personally." Danielle opened the envelope and looked at the official document inside. After everything that had happened, the irony was almost too much. "So tomorrow morning, instead of standing trial, I'll be taking command of the department that tried to frame me?" Rivera nodded. Life is full of strange twists. As she walked away, Danielle thought about the challenge ahead. Cleaning up corruption wouldn't be easy. The system that had allowed Mercer and Wilson to operate for years was still in place. But now she would have the power to change it from within. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. FBI launches investigation into police corruption. 2 officers named as suspects remain at large. The story was breaking. There would be no quiet cover-up after all. Tomorrow she would walk into the West Side precinct not as a defendant, but as Chief Washington. And the real work of justice would begin. The courtroom buzzed with tension as people filed in for what promised to be an unusual hearing. News of Danielle Washington's arrest and the subsequent dropping of charges had spread like wildfire through the city's legal community. Now everyone was curious about this emergency hearing, called by Judge Raymond Harris. Danielle sat at the defense table, dressed in a tailored Navy suit rather than jail clothes. Though the charges against her had been dropped, she had requested this hearing to put certain facts on the public record. At the prosecution table, District Attorney Eleanor Wells shuffled papers nervously. The case had become a political minefield overnight, with rumors of police corruption swirling through every government office in the city. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Raymond Harris," the bailiff announced. Judge Harris entered looking haggard, the weight of his compromised ethics visible in the dark circles under his eyes. He took his seat and surveyed the packed courtroom. "Before we begin, I want to address something," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "The case against Danielle Washington has been dismissed with prejudice at the request of the district attorney's office. However, Ms. Washington has requested this hearing to make a statement for the record, which I have granted." He nodded to Danielle, who stood and approached the podium. "Thank you, Your Honor," she began. 3 days ago, I was arrested and charged with possession of narcotics and theft of police evidence, crimes I did not commit. I was denied bail in this very courtroom and rushed to trial with unusual speed." She paused, looking directly at Judge Harris. What the court didn't know, or perhaps chose to ignore, was that the evidence against me was planted by corrupt officers attempting to silence me because of my work exposing police misconduct. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. "I am here today not seeking personal vindication, but to ensure that the record reflects the truth. Officer James Mercer and Detective Paul Wilson have engaged in a pattern of evidence tampering, drug theft, and false arrests targeting primarily people of color in our community. District Attorney Wells stood. Your Honor, while the people acknowledge that serious questions have been raised about the conduct of the officers in question, many of these allegations remain under investigation and would have remained uninvestigated if they had succeeded in framing me, Danielle interrupted. How many others without my legal background or resources have been railroaded by these officers? How many are sitting in prison right now based on fabricated evidence? The judge raised his hand. Ms. Washington has the floor, Ms. Wells. You'll have your opportunity to respond. Danielle continued. I have documented at least 12 cases where these officers used similar tactics. In each case, when the defendant secured proper legal representation and challenged the evidence, charges were mysteriously dropped, just as they were in my case. She turned to face the gallery, where reporters scribbled notes and members of the community watched intently. This isn't just about two corrupt officers. It's about a system that allowed them to operate unchecked for years. It's about a culture that pressures people to take plea deals rather than risk trial, even when they're innocent. As Danielle spoke, the courtroom doors quietly opened. Captain Rivera slipped in, accompanied by 2 FBI agents and Officer Chen. They stood at the back, watching. I am calling for a complete review of every case Mercer and Wilson touched during their careers, Danielle continued. Every person convicted based on their testimony or evidence they handled deserves a second look at their case. Judge Harris cleared his throat. Ms. Washington, while I appreciate your concerns, I'm not sure this court has the authority to— Actually, Your Honor, one of the FBI agents called from the back, striding forward. If I may address the court? The judge looked startled but nodded. I'm Special Agent Kevin Brown with the FBI as of this morning. We have opened a formal investigation into Officers Mercer and Wilson based on substantial evidence of civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and corruption. We are working with the U.S. Attorney's Office to review all cases involving these officers. This announcement sent a shockwave through the courtroom. Reporters rushed out to file updates. Agent Brown continued. We also have evidence that certain members of the judiciary may have been coerced or blackmailed into participating in this scheme. All eyes turned to Judge Harris, whose face had gone pale. In light of these developments, Danielle said, returning to her statement, I would like to submit to the court documentation of the pattern of misconduct I've uncovered, along with testimony from previous victims of these officers' tactics. She placed a thick folder on the clerk's desk. Judge Harris stared at it for a long moment before speaking. The court accepts this documentation and will cooperate fully with the federal investigation. His voice cracked slightly. And if I may depart from procedure for a moment, I would like to offer my personal apology to Ms. Washington for my role in this injustice. A hush fell over the courtroom. It was virtually unheard of. For a sitting judge to make such an admission. I was compromised, he continued, the words clearly difficult for him. Detective Wilson had evidence of personal indiscretions, which he used to pressure me into denying Ms. Washington bail and fast-tracking her case. I allowed fear to override my oath to uphold justice, and for that I am deeply sorry. He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I will be submitting my resignation to the Judicial Review Board immediately following this hearing, and will cooperate fully with any investigation into my conduct. The courtroom erupted in shocked conversations. The bailiff called for order. When the room quieted, District Attorney Wells stood. Your Honor, in light of these revelations, the people request a special prosecutor be appointed to review all cases potentially tainted by this misconduct, to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest from my office. So ordered, Judge Harris replied. As the formal proceedings concluded, Captain Rivera approached Danielle. That was quite a statement, he said. You've set in motion changes that are long overdue in our department. Danielle gathered her papers. It's just the beginning. The real work starts tomorrow. Speaking of tomorrow, Rivera said, the mayor wanted me to remind you that your swearing in as chief is scheduled for 9 a.m. A reporter who overheard this spun around. Did you say swearing in as chief? Chief of what? Danielle and Rivera exchanged glances. The news of her appointment hadn't been made public yet. No comment at this time, Rivera said smoothly. The mayor will make any official announcements. But the damage was done. The reporter was already on his phone, undoubtedly breaking the story that the woman just exonerated of criminal charges was about to become the city's new police chief. As they left the courtroom, they were met by a growing crowd of reporters shouting questions. "Ms. Washington, is it true you're the new police chief? Did you know about your appointment before you were arrested? Do you think the officers framed you because they knew you were going to be their boss?" Danielle raised her hands for quiet. "I will make a full statement tomorrow after the mayor's official announcement. For now, all I can say is that justice is a journey, not a destination. What happened to me happens to people in our community every day, people without law degrees or connections. My priority will be ensuring equal justice for everyone, regardless of race, income, or background." She pushed through the crowd with Rivera at her side. "You handled that well," he said when they reached his car. "The press is going to be all over this story." "Let them," Danielle replied. "Sunlight is the best disinfectant." Meanwhile, across town in a dingy motel room, James Mercer paced anxiously while watching the news coverage of the hearing on a small television. "We're screwed," he said, turning to Paul Wilson, who sat on the bed counting cash. "The feds are involved now. They're going to find everything." Paul barely looked up. "That's why we're leaving tonight. I've got a contact who can get us across the border with new IDs. And then what? Spend our lives looking over our shoulders? What about my kids?" "You should have thought about your kids before you agreed to frame an innocent woman," Paul snapped. "Besides, you heard the news. She's going to be the new police chief. Can you imagine what would have happened if we hadn't been tipped off? We'd be facing her in her new office tomorrow, pretending we didn't just try to send her to prison." James slumped into a chair. "Who leaked that information anyway? About her becoming chief? Does it matter? Someone at City Hall must have let it slip. The point is, we got lucky. Now we've got a chance to disappear before they build a case against us." What they didn't know was that FBI agents were already in the motel parking lot, having tracked Paul's cell phone. Agent Brown was coordinating the arrest team, preparing to move in. Back at her apartment, Danielle was finally able to shower in her own bathroom and sleep in her own bed after days in jail. But sleep wouldn't come easily. Her mind raced with everything that had happened and everything still to come. Her phone buzzed with a text from Anthony Torres. "Just heard from my friend at the FBI. They're closing in on Mercer and Wilson right now." She texted back, "Good. Keep me posted." She got up and went to her home office, pulling out a legal pad. If she was going to be police chief starting tomorrow, she needed a plan. There would be resistance to an outsider taking charge, especially one who had just exposed corruption within the ranks. She needed to identify allies within the department who could help implement the changes she envisioned. Officer Chen was an obvious candidate. His willingness to question the arrest and investigate his fellow officers showed integrity. Captain Rivera, despite his initial slowness to act, had ultimately done the right thing. But beyond them, she would need to carefully assess the department's personnel. Her phone rang. The mayor. "Danielle, I just saw the news coverage. You turned what should have been a quiet hearing into a public expose of police corruption. Did you expect me to keep quiet about being framed?" The mayor sighed. "No, but the timing is complicated. We wanted your appointment to be seen as a positive new chapter, not a reaction to scandal." "Maybe it needs to be both," Danielle replied. "The department needs transformation, not just a new face at the top. Just try to strike a hopeful tone at tomorrow's ceremony. The city needs healing, not more division." After hanging up, Danielle returned to her notes. The mayor wasn't wrong about the need for healing, but real healing couldn't begin without accountability. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Anthony. "They got them. Mercer and Wilson in custody." No resistance. She felt a weight lift from her shoulders. At least the two corrupt officers wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else while the investigation proceeded. Early the next morning, Danielle dressed carefully in a charcoal suit with a deep purple blouse. Professional but distinctive. Today would set the tone for her entire tenure as chief. As she was about to leave, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Captain Rivera. "I thought you might like a ride to the ceremony," he offered. "It's a bit of a media circus out there." Indeed, she could see news vans parked along her street. "Thank you," she said, grabbing her briefcase. "Any updates I should know about before we arrive?" Mercer and Wilson were arrested last night. They're cooperating, apparently trying to get deals, and Judge Harris officially resigned this morning. Danielle nodded. "Fast developments." "That's not all," Rivera continued as they walked to his car. 5 other officers have requested transfers since last night. I suspect they're worried about what Mercer and Wilson might reveal, or what I might discover once I have access to all the department's records," Danielle added. The drive to City Hall was silent, both of them contemplating the challenges ahead. When they arrived, the plaza was packed with media, city officials, and curious citizens. Inside, the mayor was waiting in a side room. "Ready for this?" he asked Danielle. "I've been ready my whole career," she replied. They walked together to the podium set up in the main hall. The room fell silent as the mayor stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this historic day. As you know, our long-serving police chief Thomas Green retired last month after 20 years of dedicated service." He paused, looking out at the crowd. "After an extensive nationwide search, we identified an exceptional candidate to lead our police department into a new era. Someone with impeccable legal credentials, a deep commitment to community engagement, and a proven record of fighting for justice." Cameras flashed as Danielle stood beside him. "Recent events have cast a shadow over our city and our police department, but I believe those events have only confirmed that we made the right choice. Because the person we selected has demonstrated, under the most difficult circumstances imaginable, exactly the qualities we need: integrity, courage, and an unwavering commitment to justice." He turned to Danielle. "It is my honor to introduce our new police chief, Danielle Washington." The applause was thunderous as Danielle stepped to the microphone. In the crowd, she could see Officer Chen, Anthony Torres, and many others who had supported her through the ordeal. "Thank you, Mayor Thompson. I accept this position with a profound sense of responsibility and purpose." She took a deep breath before continuing. "I stand before you today with a unique perspective. 3 days ago, I was sitting in a jail cell, framed for crimes I didn't commit by officers who abused their power and betrayed their oath. The room went completely still. I could speak to you about being angry or seeking revenge, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I believe in justice. Real justice that serves all people equally regardless of their race, their wealth, or their connections." She looked out at the assembled officers in their dress uniforms. "To the honorable men and women of this department who serve with integrity every day, I see you. I respect you, and I will work tirelessly to restore the community's trust in the vital work you do." Then she turned to face the community members in the audience, and to the citizens who have felt voiceless, who have experienced injustice at the hands of those sworn to protect you. "I hear you. I've walked in your shoes, and I promise that under my leadership your experiences will not be ignored or dismissed." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The path ahead won't be easy. Transforming systems never is. But together we can build a department that truly serves and protects everyone in our community with dignity, respect, and equal justice." As she finished, the room erupted in applause. She had struck exactly the right tone, acknowledging the pain of the past while offering hope for the future. The mayor stepped forward with a Bible, and Danielle placed her hand on it to take the oath of office. As she recited the words promising to uphold the law and serve the community, she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. After the ceremony, as she made her way through the crowd accepting congratulations, she spotted 2 familiar faces at the back of the room, Officer Mercer and Detective Wilson. They were in handcuffs, flanked by FBI agents. They had been brought to witness the swearing-in of the woman they had tried to destroy, now becoming their boss. Their eyes met across the room. In that moment, justice felt real and tangible. Not as revenge, but as the natural consequence of their actions and the restoration of proper order. The agents led the disgraced officers away, but Danielle knew their case was just the beginning. There would be more discoveries, more accountability, and eventually, she hoped, true healing and reform. Captain Rivera appeared at her side. "Ready to see your new office, Chief Washington?" She smiled, feeling the challenge and promise of the days ahead. "Yes, Captain. We have a lot of work to do." 6 months had passed since Danielle Washington became police chief. The morning sun streamed through the windows of her office as she reviewed the latest department statistics. Crime rates were stable, community complaints were down 30%, and officer morale, after an initial dip during the transition, was slowly climbing. She looked up at a knock on her door. Officer Chen, recently promoted to sergeant, entered with a stack of files. The review committee finished another batch, he said, placing the files on her desk. 30 more cases connected to Wilson and Mercer. 15 recommended for immediate dismissal based on tainted evidence. Danielle nodded, adding these to her growing workload. Any of these people still in custody? 3. I've already notified the DA's office to expedite their release. Good work, Chen. How many does that make now? 178 cases reviewed, 92 overturned or dismissed. He paused. It's making a difference, Chief. Real people are getting their lives back. After Chen left, Danielle leaned back in her chair, reflecting on the challenging months since taking command. The department had been in worse shape than anyone realized. Beyond Wilson and Mercer, the investigation had identified 3 other officers involved in similar misconduct. 2 assistant district attorneys had been implicated in covering up police wrongdoing. And Judge Harris, after resigning, had pleaded guilty to accepting bribes and was awaiting sentencing. Her phone rang. Captain Rivera. Chief, just wanted to give you a heads up. The sentencing hearing for Wilson and Mercer is scheduled for next week. The press is already calling for comments. Thanks for the warning, Danielle replied. Make sure our public statement stays focused on accountability and reform, not retribution. Will do. Also, that community oversight board you established is requesting a meeting to review the new use of force guidelines. Schedule it for Thursday. I want to hear their input before we finalize the policy. After hanging up, Danielle walked to the large window overlooking the city. When she'd taken this job, many had predicted she would fail, that her outsider status and the circumstances of her appointment would make it impossible to lead effectively. The police union had initially been hostile, and several veteran officers had resigned in protest. But she had found allies too, both within the department and in the community. Officer Chen had become her right hand, helping identify other officers who shared her vision for reform. Captain Rivera, despite his initial hesitation, had become a crucial bridge between the old guard and the new direction. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Her assistant poked her head in. Chief, your 11 o'clock is here. Tyler Jones? Danielle smiled. Send him in. Tyler entered nervously, his eyes taking in the office of the police chief. At 22, he was still trying to rebuild his life after his wrongful arrest 2 years earlier. Thank you for meeting with me, Chief Washington, he said, shaking her hand. Please call me Danielle. We're not in court anymore. They sat in the comfortable chairs arranged in the corner of her office rather than across her desk, a deliberate choice Danielle made to put visitors at ease. How's the job going? She asked. Tyler's face brightened. Really good. I just got promoted to shift supervisor at the community center. The kids in the after-school program are amazing. That's wonderful. And the expungement process? Complete, he said proudly. My record is clean thanks to you and the review committee. I can apply to college now without checking the criminal record box. Danielle nodded, genuinely happy for him. Tyler had been one of the first cases she'd prioritized for review after becoming chief. A young man arrested by Wilson and Mercer with planted evidence, whose case had been mysteriously dropped when she'd agreed to represent him. Actually, Tyler continued, that's partly why I wanted to see you. I'm applying to the criminal justice program at City College. I've been thinking that maybe I could help others who've been through what I experienced. That's a worthy goal, Danielle said. We need more people in the system who understand its flaws firsthand. Tyler hesitated. There's something else. I'm considering applying to the police academy after I finish my degree. This surprised her. Really? After everything that happened to you? Because of everything that happened, he clarified. I saw the worst of policing when Wilson and Mercer framed me. But I've also seen what good policing can be since you took over. The community outreach programs, the transparency initiatives, the accountability measures. I want to be part of that change. Danielle felt a surge of hope. Perhaps the most powerful indicator that her reforms were working was this young man's willingness to join the very institution that had once wronged him. The academy would be lucky to have you, Tyler, and when you graduate, there will be a place for you in this department if you want it. After Tyler left, Danielle checked her calendar for the afternoon. She had a meeting with the mayor and city council to discuss the department's budget for the coming year. She'd been fighting for funds to expand the community policing program, and to improve officer training, particularly in de-escalation techniques. As she gathered her materials, her assistant appeared again. Chief Detective Wilson's lawyer just called. Wilson wants to meet with you before his sentencing hearing. Says he has information you'd want to hear. Danielle frowned. Paul Wilson had pleaded guilty to multiple charges including evidence tampering, civil rights violations, and obstruction of justice. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he had provided testimony against several other corrupt officers and officials. What more could he possibly offer now? Set it up, she decided. But at the federal detention center, not here. And I want the FBI present. Later that afternoon, after her budget meeting, Danielle drove to the detention center where Wilson was being held. Agent Brown met her in the lobby. Any idea what this is about? He asked as they were led to the visitation room. None. But Wilson's always calculating. He wouldn't ask for this meeting without a reason. Paul Wilson looked much older than when Danielle had last seen him 6 months ago. Prison had not been kind to a former police detective. He sat across from them at the metal table, hands cuffed. "Thank you for coming, Chief Washington," he said, his voice lacking the arrogance she remembered. "I know you have no reason to do me any favors." "I'm here out of curiosity, not courtesy," Danielle replied coolly. "What information do you have?" Wilson leaned forward. "My sentencing is next week. The prosecutor is asking for 15 years. "That seems appropriate given your crimes," Agent Brown commented. "Maybe," Wilson acknowledged. "But I think I can offer something worth a recommendation for leniency." Danielle's eyes narrowed. "You've already testified against your accomplices. What else could you possibly have to trade?" "Information about Judge Harris," Wilson said. Specifically who else he was working with. This caught Danielle's attention. Throughout the investigation, Judge Harris had maintained that his corruption was limited to the cases involving Wilson and Mercer, that they alone had blackmailed him into cooperating with their scheme. "Are you saying Harris was on the take from others too?" Wilson nodded. 3 other cops, 2 from narcotics, 1 from Vice, and a big-time developer who got favorable rulings in zoning disputes. "I have dates, case numbers, and the exact amounts paid." Danielle and Agent Brown exchanged glances. If true, this would explain some unusual patterns they'd noticed in Harris's rulings but hadn't been able to connect. "Why are you only sharing this now?" Danielle asked. "Insurance policy," Wilson admitted. "Thought I might need one more card to play before sentencing." Agent Brown took over the questioning, getting specific. "Do you?" Tales they could investigate to corroborate Wilson's claims. When they had what they needed, Danielle stood to leave. "If this checks out, I'll speak to the prosecutor about your cooperation," she said. "But don't expect miracles. You still tried to frame an innocent woman and put her in prison." Wilson looked down at his cuffed hands. "For what it's worth, which isn't much, I regret that now. Not just because it backfired, but because—" He trailed off, then forced himself to meet her eyes. "Because you turned out to be exactly what the department needed." Danielle didn't respond to this unexpected admission. She simply nodded to the guard to indicate they were finished. Outside the detention center, Agent Brown whistled low. "If even half of what he shared is true, we're looking at a much wider corruption network than we thought." "I'm not surprised," Danielle said. "Systems like this rarely have just a few bad apples. The culture enables the corruption." Back at the precinct, Danielle found Anthony Torres waiting in her office. Now working officially as a department consultant, he was helping implement new evidence handling procedures to prevent tampering. "How'd the Wilson meeting go?" he asked. She filled him in on the new allegations. "We'll need to investigate quietly. If there are dirty cops still on the force, I don't want to tip them off." "I can help with that," Anthony offered. "I've built some relationships with officers who might notice things you wouldn't see from the chief's office." "Good. Work with Chen on this. But keep it close, just the 3 of you for now." After Anthony left, Danielle's phone rang again. It was Lisa Patel, who had been promoted to Public Information Officer. "Chief, the Tribune is running a big story tomorrow on the department's transformation under your leadership. They want a final comment from you." Danielle thought for a moment. "Tell them this. Real change doesn't happen overnight or through the actions of a single person. It happens when good people within a system decide that justice matters more than comfort or tradition. I'm proud of the officers who have embraced reform and the community members who have engaged with us in this process. Together, we're building the department this city deserves." After hanging up, Danielle turned to the wall of her office where she'd hung a simple framed document, her oath of office. Every morning she read it as a reminder of why she was here and what she had promised to do. That evening she left work earlier than usual to attend a community forum in the neighborhood where she'd grown up. These monthly meetings had been one of her first initiatives as chief, creating spaces where citizens could speak directly with police leadership about their concerns. The community center was packed when she arrived. She recognized many faces: small business owners, community activists, religious leaders, and ordinary residents who had been showing up consistently to these forums. As she took her seat at the front, alongside Captain Rivera and two community representatives, she felt a surge of satisfaction. The atmosphere in the room was different from those early tense meetings. There was still healthy skepticism, but also a growing sense of partnership. The forum began with updates on crime statistics and community initiatives, followed by an open discussion period. A woman stood up identifying herself as a teacher at the local high school. 6 months ago, my students were afraid of the police, she said. Now, thanks to your school outreach program, they're having real conversations with the officers who serve our neighborhood. Some are even considering careers in law enforcement. That's a profound change. Others spoke about issues still needing attention: response times in certain neighborhoods, concerns about the handling of mental health calls, questions about the new Civilian Oversight Board. Danielle listened carefully, taking notes. No one was claiming the department was perfect, but the tenor of the conversation reflected real progress. Near the end of the meeting, an elderly man who had been sitting quietly in the back stood up. Danielle recognized him immediately: Mr. Washington, her father. I've lived in this community for 40 years, he began, his deep voice commanding attention. Seen a lot of chiefs come and go, made a lot of promises, broke most of them. He paused, looking directly at his daughter. But this one's different. Not just because she's my daughter, though I'm mighty proud of that fact. The room rippled with surprised murmurs from those who hadn't made the connection. She's different because she knows what justice feels like from both sides, knows what it means to be treated unfairly by the very system she now leads. His voice grew stronger. That kind of knowledge changes a person, makes them lead with both their head and their heart. Danielle felt her eyes misting as her father continued. 6 months ago, I was ready to tell my grandsons they couldn't trust the police. Now I'm teaching them that working with the police, the right kind of police, is how we build the community we want to live in. After the forum, Danielle walked out with her father. You didn't have to do that. Dad, she said, squeezing his hand. Yes, I did. People need to understand where you come from and why they can trust you to keep your word. He looked at her with pride. Your mother would have been so proud to see you today. As they parted, Danielle's phone buzzed. There with a text from Chen. New lead on Harris corruption. Developer Stanley Winter's name came up in document search. Need to talk ASAP. The work never ended. For every issue resolved, new challenges emerged. But for the first time since taking the job, Danielle felt confident that they were on the right path. The department was changing, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. A week later, Danielle sat in the back of the courtroom as James Mercer and Paul Wilson were sentenced. Mercer received 12 years in federal prison. Wilson, after his additional cooperation, received 10. As they were led away in handcuffs, Wilson glanced back and made brief eye contact with Danielle. There was no smugness left in his expression, just a resigned acceptance of his fate. Judge Morrison, who had taken over many of Harris's cases, addressed the courtroom before adjourning. The actions of these former officers represent a profound betrayal of public trust, but their exposure and prosecution also represent something important: our system's capacity to correct itself, to hold accountable those who abuse their power. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Danielle for comment. Chief Washington, do you feel justice has been served today? She considered the question carefully before responding. Justice isn't just about punishment for wrongdoing, though accountability is essential. True justice is about restoration and reform, creating systems that work fairly for everyone and rebuilding trust where it's been broken. She looked out at the crowd of journalists and citizens gathered on the courthouse steps. What happened to me was unjust. What happened to the many other victims of these officers' corruption was unjust. But from that injustice has come an opportunity to create something better. That work continues every day, in every interaction between police and the communities we serve. As the crowd dispersed, Danielle's phone rang. It was the mayor. "Just saw your statement on the news. Well said." "Thank you, sir. The city council unanimously approved your budget proposal last night. Full funding for the community policing expansion and the training initiatives." "That's excellent news," Danielle replied, genuinely pleased. These programs were at the heart of her reform strategy. "You've proven a lot of people wrong these past 6 months, Danielle," the mayor continued. "Myself included, if I'm being honest. I wasn't sure you could navigate the politics of this position, especially given how you came into it." "The politics are the easy part," Danielle said. "The real challenge is changing culture. That's a long game. Well, you've made an impressive start. Keep it up." After hanging up, Danielle walked down the courthouse steps and across the street to the police headquarters. Officers nodded respectfully as she passed. Some had been resistant to her leadership initially, but actions spoke louder than words, and her fair, transparent approach had won over many skeptics. In her office, she found a small package on her desk with a note from Chen. "Found this while organizing the evidence from the Wilson-Mercer case. Thought you might want it." Chen inside was her law license, which had been confiscated when she was arrested 6 months ago. Seeing it brought back the rush of emotions from those difficult days, the confusion, the anger, the sense of betrayal. But as she placed the license in her desk drawer, Danielle realized something important. That experience, painful as it was, had uniquely equipped her for the work she was doing now. It had given her insight into the system's flaws that she might never have gained otherwise. Sometimes justice worked in unexpected ways. Her intercom buzzed. "Chief, the new recruit class is ready for your address." "On my way," she replied as she walked toward the academy building. Danielle thought about the message she wanted to convey to these future officers. They would be entering a department in transition, one striving to balance effective policing with accountability and community trust. The cadets stood at attention as she entered, their faces young and earnest. Among them, she noticed a few who came from the very communities that had historically been over-policed and underserved. "At ease," she said, and they relaxed slightly. "Before I begin, I want to tell you a story. 6 months ago, I was sitting in a jail cell in this very building, framed for a crime I didn't commit by officers who had forgotten their oath." The cadets exchanged surprised glances. Most had heard rumors about how she became chief, but few knew the details. "I tell you this not to make you uncomfortable, but because it's essential that you understand something. Power can corrupt, and the badge you'll wear carries tremendous power. How you use that power will define not just your career, but the lives of countless people you'll encounter." She walked slowly along their line, making eye contact with each cadet. "Some of you may be wondering why I would want to lead a department that once wronged me so profoundly. The answer is simple. Because I believe in what policing can and should be. I believe that despite its flaws and failures, this system can serve justice when good people commit themselves to doing the right thing, even when it's difficult." She stopped and faced them directly. "That's the challenge I offer you today. Be those good people. Remember that the true measure of your service won't be the arrests you make or the commendations you receive, but the trust you build and the dignity with which you treat every person you encounter, especially those who may not look like you or share your experiences." As she concluded her address, Danielle felt a sense of hope stronger than any she'd experienced since taking the oath of office. The path forward would not be easy. There would be setbacks and resistance, both within the department and from external forces invested in the status quo. But standing before these new recruits, seeing their determination and idealism,